Golan Heights in Syria. The Syrian Golan is a region in southwest Syria which was occupied on June 5, 1967 by Israeli forces. The Golan's overall land mass is 1,860 square kilometers, which is approximately 1% of Syria's total area. About 1,500 square kilometers remains under Israeli occupation. Before this Israeli occupation, the Golan was home to over 140,000 Syrians, most of whom were driven out of their homeland and into internally displaced persons, IDPs, status. Till this day, almost 40 years later, the Syrian inhabitants of the Golan are still unable to return to their homes, towns and cities. Today these Syrians exceed 500,000 people. Some Syrians remained in the occupied Syrian Golan and continue to live in small villages amounting to approximately 20,000 Syrians. Most of the Syrian cities, towns and villages in the Golan were destroyed by Israeli occupation forces, who in turn have built over 40 illegal settlements despite all international condemnation. Israel continues not only to occupy the Syrian Golan but to also destroy its ancient ruins and geopolitical atmosphere for the sole purpose of cleansing the Golan of its Syrian people and their history. In October 1973, during the October War, Syria attempted to liberate its Golan from Israeli occupation. Syria succeeded after the disengagement agreements to regain a strip of territory that included the main city and capital of the Golan, Qutra. When Qutrayan citizens returned to their liberated homes, they were traumatized and stunned to find that every home, building, mosque and church in the city had been deliberately demolished by Israeli bulldozers and dynamite. Even the city's graves had been dug and robbed by the Israelis, all just days before the Israeli withdrawal, as documented by the BBC and others. The city remains destroyed as living proof of Israeli aggression towards civilians. On December 14, 1981, Israel annexed the occupied Syrian Golan. The international community responded with Security Council Resolution 497, 1981, which unanimously called this move null and void, and not one country has legitimized it. Since then, every year the UN passes General Assembly resolution titled the Occupied Syrian Golan, which reaffirms the illegality of the Israeli occupation and annexation. In 1991, peace talks between Syria and Israel started at the Madrid conference, in which the return of the Syrian Golan was a central topic. However, negotiations came to a dead end due to Israel's refusal to withdraw completely from the Syrian Golan. To this day, Israel refuses to implement UN Security Council Resolutions 242, 1967, and 338, 1973, which call for the complete withdrawal from all the Arab territories occupied in 1967, including the occupied Syrian Golan, as well as Security Council Resolution 479, 1981, which confirms the illegality of Israel's annexation of the Golan. Syrians continue to wait for the murderous and illegal occupation of their land to come to an end. Syrian diplomacy has launched many calls in order to resume peace talks. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has sent several messages in this regard. However, the provocative visit of former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, which sparked the 2000 Palestinian uprising, the US invasion of Iraq in 2003, along with Israeli aggression against the Palestinians and Lebanon in 2006, has widened the gap and complicated the picture. Despite the passage of 47 years of this occupation and the demands of the resolutions of international legitimacy, Israel to end its occupation of the Syrian Golan and to end its daily repressive practices and flagrant violations of all international conventions and conventions, Israel remains indifferent to all these international positions and resolutions and continues its illegal and aggressive practices. Any deterrent, ignoring international laws and United Nations resolutions, taking advantage of protection from the accountability given to them by some members of the Security Council. The government of the Syrian Arab Republic has consistently affirmed that the achievement of a just and comprehensive peace in the Middle East requires the implementation of United Nations resolutions aimed at ending the Israeli occupation of the Syrian Golan and other Arab territories, foremost of which is Security Council Resolution 497, 1981. Syria has consistently affirmed its claim, in particular Security Council Resolutions 242, 1967, and 338, 1973, and the principle of land for peace, which is the reference to the peace process launched in Madrid in 1991, which was confirmed by President Bashar al-Assad, Syrian Arab Republic, on more than one occasion. It is regrettable that the international community disregards Israel's behavior as an occupying entity based on occupation and expansion. It is not interested in peace. It has attacked the countries of the region. It has consistently violated international law and the Charter of the United Nations. It has responded to all peace initiatives by evasive pretexts. Israel is no longer content with occupation and aggression, but continues to carry on its aggression and provocations through its logistical support for terrorists and its direct military aggression against the Syrian Arab Republic more than once in support of the terrorists. The government of the Syrian Arab Republic condemns the settlement policies of Israel in the occupied Syrian Golan, disregarding the relevant resolutions of the Security Council, the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council, which have affirmed the illegality of the construction of settlements and other Israeli activities in the occupied Syrian Golan and renewed its demand for Israel to desist from changing the urban character and demographic composition, the institutional structure and the legal status of the occupied Syrian Golan, in particular the cessation of settlements, and called upon Israel to desist from the ongoing construction of settlements. Finally, the government of the Syrian Arab Republic affirms that the stability of the Middle East and the credibility of the United Nations require action to implement all relevant international resolutions to end the Israeli occupation of the occupied Arab territories without discrimination or selectivity. The Geneva Conventions also require pressure on Israel, the occupying power, to comply with the will of the occupying power. The international community is expressed in its numerous resolutions and the withdrawal from the entire occupied Syrian Golan to the line of the 4th of June 1967.